Okay. Hi, everyone. Okay, today's icebreaker comes to us from Doorbell, who's not with us. What did she say? I had it in my head and then I lost it.
It was like a
Uh,
superpower. If you had a programming superpower, what would
oh
it
yeah,
be?
what would it be? Like understanding user behavior, understanding code, something related to that. It could be any of those. But I'm going to actually borrow one of her examples, but I think it could be my preference. Being able to like guess and intuit and respond to user behavior would solve my entire life, basically. Because the thing that you'll learn as you start working on production software is users do not do what you want them to or what you think that they're going to do. And being able to understand their psychology better is part of the job. And I'm always learning, and I think I would miss the learning, but if I could just guess, it would probably save me so many hours of my life.
Hmm.
What about you, Megan?
Um, I feel like I would pick something that's like more selfish than that, of just like I would spend less time on dumb bugs where it's just like you missed something super basic and you
You
spend
misspelled
like
a
hours
string.
debugging,
Yeah.
right? And you're just like, oh man. Or where like you didn't save and that's why like it looks wrong. It's because you didn't save your file.
Is
Like
that why you have your autosave turned on the way you do? Because
I
it's ruined your
do.
life.
Yes, ask me how I know. Um, yeah, probably something like that, which is not nearly as altruistic as EJ's answer, but
I mean, to be
what
clear,
we
my
got.
answer is also selfish because solving those problems or trying to and getting it wrong is also taking up a lot of my life. So it is also
That's
trying
true.
me trying to save some time and
There you
effort.
go.
Mm.
Any other fun ideas? You could also just agree with us if you like the answers we have. I mean, there's lots of things to want, and as a programmer, so
The
Sure.
superpower that I would like to have is ability to constantly debug, I guess. Like know how complex that may be, like immediately pinpoint what's causing and have a perfect solution. Like I
wouldn't we
wish to,
all?
yeah, I wish to have be like to go person for a quick fix for the entire team.
Sure.
Yeah, I wish for that.
Nice.
The good news is you do get that over time with pattern matching, as I've been saying. For certain
Okay.
things, and then when they look more familiar, you're like, oh, this is what's going to happen because I've seen this before, or this is why it's
Yeah.
happening because I've seen this before. So you look like a wizard, but in fact, you're just bitter and aged from experience. I'm
Um,
sure Megan can agree from her own experiences too.
Tomato, tomato.
Nick, were you gonna say something?
yeah, I guess, well, I'm gonna go ahead and be greedy. If we're talking superpowers here, I just want infinite memory retention.
Mm.
Wow.
Like, I feel
I would
like a
love.
lot of the concepts I come across, if I sit down with them for a while, I'm able to like understand it, and I'm like, okay, I can apply this. And then one day away from it, and it's whew, and it's so I'm actually finding that now. Like I'm trying to learn all my SQL commands and queries and stuff like that, and they're all pretty. They make sense. It's just if you don't practice them, you lose them very quickly. So I'm trying
Mhm.
to get into using flashcards and stuff. So um,
On this note, I would love to hear if Megan has any tips for retention, considering that you're a learning expert.
I
It doesn't need
have
to be
one
right
of
now,
those.
but like in general, if you have hot takes and resources, I think that would be good for everyone to know. Of
Let me. I wrote a blog post a while ago about
course you did.
learning
I don't
how
know
to
why I didn't
learn.
just assume.
This is one of the ones that I actually wrote. I feel like I have so many ideas for things that I don't actually write, but this one I did. Um,
I'm listening. I just need to grab a power cord. My computer's battery's getting low. Be right back.
yeah,
Sure. Living
no,
on the
no
edge.
worries.
Yeah.
The SparkNotes version is like that flashcards are the right sort of approach. You want to do retrieval practice of just like the problem is not getting more information into your brain. The problem is getting the information back out of your brain. And so like that's the
Hmm.
piece that you have to practice either by doing like flashcards or just a brain dump of like sitting and writing down everything that you can remember about a topic. And then as you go back and like fill that in, like eventually the chunks of information that you can remember will be bigger and bigger and bigger as all of the information kind of like networks together.
Hmm.
Sure.
This is a little off topic, but I'm vamping for time, so everyone has time to pick a power. But Megan, did you know? I read somewhere. I need to find the paper, but that we've learned that the ways that memory are stored and is stored and retrieved change as you get older. So it's not that you forget your
Ah,
childhood; It's that the tools that you use to store your childhood memories no longer work for retrieving them as an adult.
Sad.
So you need different avenues to access that information because the highways have changed, essentially.
That's interesting. That I mean, I guess that makes sense. It's like the neurons, the like paths and stuff are getting cleaned up as you
Mhm.
stop using them.
And it's, as far as we know, it's not that you have forgotten it. It's not that the information is no longer there. It's that you no longer have to use the programming metaphor, I guess, the API key to like go directly to where it was.
Right.
Jenny, do you have a
Sad.
power in the docket?
I was thinking pretty hard about this. I feel like right now the things that make me feel like I have superpowers is like using ChatGPT or like Copilot or something. You know, it feels like magic to me. So I don't know, maybe just like having that inside my brain, just like download all Stack Overflow and have a ChatGPT engine in my brain. So I mean, the tools are there. I could use them. It would just be nice if my brain was willing to also compute at that level. Yeah, I don't know if we're dreaming.
Yeah, I feel that. I think my second answer would probably be the ability to just instantly materialize some of the more drudgery parts of code, like the boilerplatey things that aren't interesting problem or like the setup stuff. If I could just like wave my fingers and then have that be ready for me. I don't even need to be good at the rest of it. I just want to not do the boring stuff.
Mm.
Stacey, do you have a power that you would like to have if you were to, wave a wand?
Just like most, debugging and fixing code quickly, like just with a snap, like bam, it's done.
Yeah.
But oh my God, I'm on my phone and it's like, did you guys get this? Like calls are coming in, sorry, because I have like Fios outage in my area. So I'm literally on my phone. I'm gonna sign out and come back and let me just like
Sure.
get off.
Okay.
No worries.
Okay. And Nick, you're presenting for you and Dory Bell today. That's fine. But I'm going through my head of make sure I don't forget something like I did last week with the retro that we just forgot to do. And we have a regular week, right? Jenny, did we have a module? We didn't have a module, right? For not a synchronous module.
Was it like what to ask your interviewers? Or am I like
Yeah, but I think that was supposed to be self-paced this week.
I guess like do we have questions about them that I don't know anyone to bring up or
anyone who's read the homework, it's fine if you haven't. We're not going to dock your grade. Anyone who's read the homework, do you have any questions about it?
or thoughts?
We had homework.
Yeah, I guess I really need to be way more communicative about it. There was an assignment. There was a career lab article that was linked in your brief that I think I mentioned on Slack. If I didn't, that's in my head, and that's on me.
I think there's been some kind of homework every week, no?
Yeah, and we have not been good about like not every week, but every other week or so there's like a self-paced article that we're meant to have read. But also none of it is so serious that we can't like go over it with you to like talk about it as a group or whatever.
Yeah, I would say this one I found it pretty good when I was going through my cohort. Like thinking about like good questions to ask your interviewers because I feel like they're not gonna like get you a job completely, but I feel like they do make a good like impression on the interviewers. I would like read through it and like think a little bit about it.
Yeah. If you don't want to watch the video, there are transcripts in English and Spanish, so you can just read instead, which is always my preference, almost always. I don't know what it is. I love watching presenters live, but if I know it's recorded, I'm like, I don't have time for this. I don't want to watch it.
I watch them all at 2 times speed.
Yeah.
It drives everybody that I know bananas.
Yeah, same. One of the benefits of learning to use a screen reader is that you get used to hearing spoken sound really quickly, and then you are used to hearing people sound unnatural when they're sped up. We can talk about career stuff at length for the next several weeks. Don't worry about that. But I will say that Andrew's advice is pretty good, and I do want to hear at some point from Jenny if you were able to apply any like directly in your recent job search.
I'm looking the link now. Looks like the transcript links are broken.
Yeah, in a thread in Slack, I linked to an older repo that had them. I had to ask Andrew where he put them, and I guess they just must have gotten lost when we were moving some stuff around.
Yeah. I've thought long and hard about this, but I would say my tip for interviewing in general is like do a little bit of research on the humans you're talking to and the company, obviously. For example, like when I was interviewing for my current company, I did some research, and like the co-founders are like tax nerds, like they were accountants, whatever. So I created a couple questions about that, about like news in the R&D tax industry right now, even though it's very, very boring. Also, like I knew they were a Y Combinator company, so I asked them about like their experience there, and like founders love to talk about themselves, right? Like they were just talking for 20 minutes, like it was great. But like I guess just like think about who you're talking to and curate like your questions in that way. Once you get them talking, I feel like that might leave a good impression. That might give them a good impression of you, because they come out with like a pleasant conversation, even if it's like they talked a lot about themselves and the company, but it also shows that you've like done your research and like are actually interested in them as people and like the company. Yeah, let's say that's overall my guidelines. I actually don't remember what this if like Andrew had said something similar.
Partially, yeah. He also
but
was
I would
looking
listen to
at
it.
it.
I remember thinking his was pretty.
He was also looking at it from this perspective of being like, here's your chance to tell if this is a good fit. So
Yeah.
it'd be a good idea to kind of balance a little bit of both, like questions where you're like, what's my well-being going to be like at this job, but then also just demonstrating that you're passionate about this particular position and that you've, like you were saying, done your homework.
Yeah.
I have a feeling interviewers probably don't want to hear what's the work culture like here anymore. It seems like, isn't that just like the generic what everybody asks kind of question at this point?
But I think it's generic for a reason. Like it gives you like asking something that's open-ended like that then puts the spotlight on the recruiter to have to answer it in a way where like they don't know what you're looking for. Like it's not a leading question, I guess. Like you haven't said like, "Oh, are people really nice here?" And then they can just be like, "Yeah, they are." Like it's forcing them to talk more honestly about their top things that they know about the culture. And hopefully that will align with you with what you're looking for. But if it's not, that's also a signal to be like, oh, interesting that you picked these things and not these other things.
Right. You're sort of implicitly getting someone to select and reveal for you what is important to them. And if you like the trends that you see in that answer across several people in your cycle, for instance, that is more likely to be true. If 3 separate people say 3 of the same 5 things in each of their answer to that question, then you know that those 3 things are probably consistent, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I would love to talk more about this, but I also want to give us ample time for demos and stuff because it's our last like planned issue demo, which is very cool. So congrats to all of you. Between our 2 teams, who would like to go first? Does anyone have any particular preferences?
No. Are we?
Well, Nick, since you
12 and
spoke,
13?
Yeah, right.
I can go first. Yeah, I don't mind.
Yeah. You volunteered. Go ahead.
All right. Well, why not? Let's see. Let me just share. So for issue 13, Doribel and I worked on sorry, one second. Sort items by purchase urgency. So this issue had to do with sorting shopping list items by urgency to help users plan their purchases. Items are grouped into due soon, which is 7 days or fewer, due kind of soon, which is the range of 7 to 30 days, not due soon, which is 30 plus days, and then overdue, which is 0 to 6 days since the predicted next purchase date. So these are items that the prediction for when they should be purchased next, that date has already passed. And then inactive, same thing, but these are items that it's been 60 days since the date next purchased prediction has passed. So our changes were we added urgency indicators to each item without relying solely on color. We did use color, which we as a group can kind of decide what kind of palette we want, or if we want to get rid of that altogether. But we also specifically use the terms listed above. Implemented compare purchase urgency function in dates.js. And this function will sort inactive items last, sort items by days until purchase, and then sort alphabetically if the urgency is the same. And then finally, it's overdue items are going to be sorted to the top. So it's going to be overdue, followed by items that are coming in the future, followed by inactive items, items that are past 60 days since they've been purchased, or since their predicted next purchase date has passed, rather. Okay, so for code, we touched a few files in this one, including dates.js, listitem.jsx, a little CSS, and list.jsx, which we can take a look at here. So for dates.js, we have this rather large function that maybe we can break into some more smaller components. But for the time being, what this function is going to do is basically take in our data, take in our list, make a copy of it, and then split that copy into different groups so that it can be sorted by different criteria. Then those groups are going to be concatenated. They're going to be given tags like overdue, due soon, due kind of soon, not due soon. These tags will be placed on the objects, and then the list will be concatenated back together before being sent to list.jsx to be rendered. So on list.jsx, we realized now that we have quite a bit of information that we're rendering to the UI, that maybe it was time to switch to a table, which is another thing that as a group we can discuss whether we want to go down that path. But basically, we turned our list into a table. So now the table head is these columns showing you the descriptors like product, buy now, last purchase date, urgency. We could even, now that we have a delete button, we could also fit the delete button into the table if that's something you'd like to do. But I think it also works. It's just aside from the table. And then if we go into list item, we can see that now a list item is actually a table row, which maybe that's a naming conflict now as I'm saying, because it's called list item, but it's actually a table row. So another thing we could discuss. But basically, those are the changes we made. So UI demo, right? Well, let's take a look. I've prepared this list, which I'll start from the beginning here so you can see where it is. So sort test is a list that I manually manipulated the dates in Firebase, in the Firestore, so that we could see an example of every possible category. Our overdue dates are going to be up at the top. Dates that are due soon come next, followed by kind of soon, followed by not so soon. And then finally at the bottom of the list, we have items that are no longer active. So if I were to purchase something like these mangosteen, okay, and then we should see mangosteen moves up into not due soon. It's no longer an inactive item. Same for, let's say, kiwi. Let's purchase some kiwi and see where it goes. So based on the predictive function that we use to determine whether or not, or how much time should pass, it looks like kiwi ended up being due kind of soon, or due, rather, just due soon. So yeah, you can play around with that and see, you know, how these things are organized. And but yes, so there it is in the UI, and brings us to the question section of the demonstration.
I want to say that I really like how when you were giving your demo, you kept saying we can pivot to something else if we, as a team, if we decide, you know, what something to change in the future, because like this is not in production right now. We're all here developing this for like an eventual theoretical release, and I love that we're just trying stuff, seeing what works, and not taking it too seriously, because that's kind of what this is for. It's not really, you know, as long as the users aren't seeing something that's broken. In this case, we have no users. It's fine. So I just want to call out and encourage everyone to own that kind of perspective of like, we're doing something that works for us to get the point across. It wasn't explicitly designed or spec this way, so it can be whatever we want as long as we don't break the rules. And I think that's a great mindset to have. Don't try to make it perfect. Just do something that's fine, and we can make it more fine later on.
Mm-hmm. Right. It's kind of an iterative approach, right? Where apply some feature and then talk about what the possible downfalls or collisions that might happen from other parts of the site. And take that input and put it back into the process.
One thing I do want to invite everyone to consider for the UI, as far as like listing all the stuff and getting all the information there, think of people who are going to be on their mobile phones using this app, and how maybe, unless you start adding a lot of space, the tabular layout might not be the best use of a mostly vertical UI. Nor is it the most accessible thing for people who are trying to use their large human fingers with this much space between things. Tables aren't bad, but if you are going for making sure that everyone can use this service while they're in the store on their phones, there is a risk that that table is wider than they have room to account for, and that they might have a hard time being precise with the location of all of our buttons. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah.
I also have a personal bias for like really big chunky UIs. So you don't need to do anything like to my preference, but I just love when things are big and spaced out, particularly when the primary user, we assume, is going to be mobile, because that's just kind of how the world works now. The primary, you're most likely to get mobile traffic in most of your web services. So I think one of the things that that a lot of us have to like work our way out of is assuming the desktop experience as the default experience. And it's very hard, but this is a valuable opportunity to do that.
Sure. Yeah, no, I would love to do that. Maybe we could get something like a sticky footer here, so these links stay at all times, but then have this list a lot more like something you would scroll through. So
yeah, again, great work. And again, I like that we're just trying stuff and seeing what works. It's still valuable even if we decide, oh, we don't like this actually, because now we have a concrete decision about something that was not right for us.
Sure.
Any other questions or feedback?
One thing that I thought of just as you were doing the demo is like from a user perspective, the terms that we use, like the labels in the urgency column, it might help to have something more descriptive, either like a key somewhere where they know like how soon is kind of soon, and like how is kind of soon different from soon, or maybe like updating that copy to be a little bit more specific. Would be helpful from a user perspective, but
I think
you can change that in the design.
Selfishly speaking, I think my idea supports Megan's idea. If you have more vertical space for each item, you can include that information and make it clearer.
Sure.
What Megan is getting at, I assume, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that soon and kind of soon could mean anything to anybody, depending on what baggage they're bringing as a user to the product and to the app. My shoulder is out. I need to go grab some ice. Jeez. But it helps to be as clear as possible and as unambiguous as possible. So as Megan said, you could make a legend, you could do a lot of things, but I think the best thing is to have more vertical space for each little guy here and let the context be self-evident.
Sure. Yeah, we could even like keep these as kind of like a header where it says due soon, and then there's a smaller piece of text underneath that explains what is soon, how many days exactly. Like maybe incorporating some function that actually calculates. We might even have that information. It could be something we pass along, because I think it must have been calculated to even get this information. So we could pass into the list like, oh, soon is 5 days, something like that. So
totally.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Any other thoughts, questions, comments?
One kind of unrelated thought. So when I was testing it, I clicked on one of my lists, and this wasn't like too big of an issue, so that's why I didn't like add it in my pure feedback. But I clicked on a list that we had created on day one, like it was called test list. And that list had items that I have since like deleted everything and added oranges. But when I had created that list, our items didn't have the next purchase date
Right.
value yet. So when I actually went to the list page, the app was broken because in one of your functions, you were looking for the next purchase date. And the items didn't have that field, right? So the app broke. But it's okay because it was only one list. I deleted it, created a new list. So new lists behave fine because they have that next purchase date by default. So in this scenario, I don't think it's that big of a deal. We could just delete the list and like create new ones. But I thought it might be good to like just flag that as something to consider. Like imagine it wasn't just that one list that was created before you added this feature, right? Maybe it was like 10 or 20, or it was like a real production with like real data. Might be good to like consider like, oh, what fields don't exist yet? What fields do my functions rely on that may not exist for previous data, and like have a conditional or Boolean or something, or have some way to like manage those scenarios. So just thought I would point it out. Otherwise, like if we like the app works as is now, we just add new lists and it works fine. But because it's at a small scale, it works. But if it weren't, it's just something to consider.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I agree. And I was thinking, I think maybe that was what was on my mind when I brought up the idea of having a seed file, some way to like
Yeah.
reseed the data at some point once new criteria shows up for, you know, how the data is processed. And it's like, well, if not everything in the database conforms to this structure, then it's going to crash. But
Mhm.
I think maybe just because we're like getting towards the end of the tickets, I didn't like push it any further than that. But I think that would be one solution possibly,
Mhm.
right? Is like having a seed from the beginning. So each time the shape of your database is changing, you're able to like make sure all the data points fit that criteria. I'm sure there's other ways to do it too, but
Mhm.
that's like at least
Yeah.
one I'm familiar with.
Yeah, it was a good, I think, good thing to think about. I think I replied to your message, but in like your dev environment, it makes sense to use a seed file, but with production data, you can't just like reseed the whole production database every time some new feature is released, right? So in that case, like you'd have some kind of conditionals, like if this field exists, do that. Or if it doesn't, like just return a empty, like a null value or an empty string or something to like prevent the app from crashing or
For
something
sure.
like that. But yeah.
Yeah, that's where you mentioned optional chaining, which I think would be a nice thing to have as well. So
Yeah. I
it does
did.
safely traverse an object's properties without
Yeah,
crashing.
that's what we primarily do. I know bigger companies or maybe other companies like they run some kind of like database migration um when a new feature is released so that the database fields conform to like the new feature. But I know nothing about that because I've never done it, but I'm curious to hear like what that even means or looks like. I don't know if other mentors have experience with that in any way.
Migrations are typically for more strictly relational databases that have hard structures, tables that have to have certain rows with certain fields. And so you're saying if we're adding a new field to the data structure for the future, we have to go and migrate all of the historical data to conform to this new shape. We're running a script that says go through the entire database and add this field or take this field away or change what value lives in this field. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I actually don't know what the done thing is for a thing like Firebase, which is not relational. That's something that we could all learn together because I have no idea. But off the top of my head, one thing that could be like a pseudo migration is as the data comes in, we transform it to match our new shape. So as the data comes in from the hook that gets it all, we say, does this have a last purchase date field? If not, make it exist but be null or something, so that we're correcting everything as it comes in. The downside with that is that because it runs on the client, it runs every single time anyone gets data, rather than like a migration that is run by a developer who maintains the database. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Either way, though, it's not like a big deal because again, we're not serving thousands of items to thousands of users at a time. But these are the kinds of things that are fun and maybe useful to think about for real problems in the future.
Right.
Okay, I want to make sure we get through everything because we also want to talk about our upcoming design stuff. So thank you so much, Nick. Great job. And we have Shiveksha and Stacy.
Hello. Let me just sharing my screen.
Hi,
Stacy.
guys. So Shiveksha and I were tasked with issue number 12. We're tasked with implementing a delete button as well as a function for being able to delete an item from the database. So we did add a delete button to delete from the list page by clicking the button prompts. After clicking the delete button, it prompts a message for a user confirmation. Once that's confirmed, the item is then deleted from the database. And yeah, it's deleted from the list and it's deleted from the database. We had a very small ticket. That's all we have written down. And Shivesh is going to show the demo.
So moving on, we had
You had the code. Sorry.
we
did all right. We did work in the files of the Firebase files as well as the list item files and the list JSX files. And
it was a pretty small task. So we added a delete item function in Firebase database, and in list item, we added a button that does all the handling of the delete, and also message in the list file over here, which that message gets deleted after 5 seconds. So I'm going to show you in the app. So here's the delete button that we have. So we have cups right now in the database, this cup. If I try to delete this cups in here, I click the delete button. It says, I sure want to delete the cups. I say, okay, and it gets deleted. There's a message that cups has been deleted successfully, and it's going to go after 5 seconds. So this is our delete button, and then it's get deleted from here too, from the database. So any questions and suggestions are welcome. Thank you.
Great job. We love a succinct issue. It's very life-changing after having some complex stuff. How was this at all difficult or surprising at any point, or was it pretty straightforward as it kind of seems from this presentation?
It was pretty straightforward. We did it like in 1 hour. We finished everything, like including PR and everything. So the only thing was when issue 12 and 13 were merged together, our button moved to like over here. And this morning we fixed it everything and moved into the end of the table.
Yeah, I saw the conflict happen, and I applaud you all for handling it and for putting everything back in order. My only note, I guess, based on this UI, would be that the delete button to me warrants its own column and its own like tabular position in the table, so that but maybe it's the action column or something if we're being really really granular about what goes into what column. But this is great. I think I saw also that you have a label for each delete button so that they're unique, which is a nice job on that.
Thank you.
Was there any particular reasoning that went into the 5-second rule for your message, or did you just kind of pick a number that felt right?
Yeah, I was thinking of going to 3 seconds and then went to 5 seconds. It was with the Jenny's comment that message was still there. And then I thought of like 5 seconds would be easy to like read that message and delete it itself.
Totally. I need to find it again, but there's an article I read recently that talked about the recommended time you show temporary messages. And it's based on you start with a baseline of like 3 seconds, and then you add a number of seconds per number of words for the average reading time for a person. But I want to call out also that when it comes to accessibility, there are rules about how you handle temporary messaging. Because some people might need more time to read than others, particularly for longer text. So in a production app where you have users log in and have their own settings, one feature you might want to target in the future, not necessarily for this, but just in general when you're dealing with messaging like this, is giving users control over how long messages last so that they can set a reading length that makes sense for them.
Yeah, that makes sense too.
Or you give them the ability, for instance, maybe they read fast and they're like annoyed by seeing things. You can give them the ability to manually dismiss stuff too that they've already read. Good job though. Again, great stuff. Any other comments or questions?
No question. What happens when you click unpurchased?
This one?
Yeah,
Decided to purchase and
yeah, purchase
come
something.
in, and we have an alert.
Okay, okay, got it. Yeah, I think maybe I mentioned this, but I guess these are both like actions for one item. So I would like consider making that messaging consistent. Like you could use the same message, right? But just update the message based on what just happened. Like right now we
Mhm.
have like when you delete, you get a message on the screen. When you purchase it, you get a pop-up, which is like just different like behaviors or different things that happen. So yeah, something to consider when you like redesign the app to think
Yeah.
about making everything consistent and also just using the same components or like the same state to display messages for different situations.
We definitely need to refactor that. Before we were using alert, and at some point we switched to state messages. Yeah.
In real apps, you'll see this all the time where you can see a clear cut for when some new feature became the pattern for something, and no one's gone back to the older parts to clean up the garden, metaphorically speaking. So it happens to everyone, but it's always a good opportunity to clean things up and to keep your garden tidy, if you will, metaphorically speaking.
Right.
Great job.
So one
So
other
you.
thing,
Go ahead.
one other thing that I can't remember if we talked about or not, was ARIA live regions. Like if you have announcements that are showing up on a different part of the page than what the user is interacting with, like somebody who's using a screen reader might not know that that announcement has showed up because their focus is still up here. But you can use an attribute called ARIA live that will announce like, hey, this other like message region or something has changed, and it'll say that, like it'll announce that to the user. EJ, I'm sure you have more thoughts on that. I'll drop a link into the
I have a demo I can also
channel.
play for. I need to record a video recording of this because I'm so tired of having to fight with Zoom to make it work, but I'll do a recording eventually. But if you're wondering why would we want that, think about how we as sighted people can see an entire page, and so we're able to see parts of the UI that change that aren't visually connected to each other. So an ARIA live region is a way of saying you did an action on the upper right quadrant, and there's something that you are far away from that you wouldn't be able to hear with your screen reader. So we're telling you that it happened. Does that make sense? One example that might help is like if you are shopping and you click add to cart, it might be helpful to have it be confirmed that that happened. So you would probably see like a 1 over the cart icon in a shopping cart, but it might be helpful to hear item X added to cart or something like that, depending on, or even removed from cart, because we're talking about destructive data being really important to confirm, things like that. So if you are, in general, if you are trying to have something happen in one area, but you're confirming it without moving the user around, you want to make sure that they know it happened by telling them somehow. And sometimes users can assume that something good happened and you don't need to be too noisy with your messaging, but it's good to confirm if there's not a lot of confidence that something might have happened a certain way. That's a whole separate UX topic, as one can probably imagine, and I will do a demo if and when we have time. But I want to make sure we spend some time discussing our design issue because it's the last thing we have to do together as a team.
Woo!
Which, by the way, does not mean everything's over, but we're spending some time on this. Like we're devoting our time to this for a couple of weeks. So let's see. I'll go ahead and share my screen. Thank you for the great demo. Now, everyone, place your bets as to whether Firefox will let me do things because I've had 3,000 tabs open.
Story of my life.
I'm working on an open source thing with a friend and doing a lot of research, and I'm not saving any bookmarks because I love to live on the edge and hurt myself when I forget what I was looking at. Oh, I also want to, vamping for time here, I also want to say that my friend Nick said that she would love to take some time to speak with all of you. So I was thinking that the time that would make the most sense is if we devote one of our weekly syncs to hanging out with her, because we all gather at that time. It's on the weekend. It's at a reasonable-ish time for her. She's in Hong Kong. So if it's okay with you, all of you, because we're sort of out of planned issues to discuss, I think it would be awesome to have the sync be a meeting with her. What do you all think? We can also ask Dory Bell, of course, what she thinks. Uh, but I was thinking also that we can record it so that we can all learn from something, but maybe we don't list it or make it public so that the recording is available for that particular thing, just for Nick's privacy. Because she didn't agree to be in TCL with us. She's agreeing to hang out with us and give us information. Not that I'm sure
You
she
can
would
always
mind, but
do just record the demos part of it and then
yeah,
not record the rest of
exactly.
it.
She said she's very happy to give you any input that you all think might be helpful. But she was worried that because she doesn't have like a traditional I work 9 to 5 from tech job to tech job career path, that it wouldn't be helpful. And I said, oh no, they're gonna love you. It's fine. You're my friend, of course, so they have to.
Yeah.
Okay. So GitHub kept doing not resolving, but I think we're there. We're there. We're gonna call this good. Please. My gosh, I think I just need to get a new laptop after all this time. It's finally happening. So we are at the end of the planned brief, if you can believe it. Before I open this issue, I also want to point out that we have another learning module this week, which I'll link to in Slack, unless Megan, you want to handle that since you're so much
I
faster at
did.
it than I
I
am.
posted them.
You did.
It
You're
helps
better
when
than
you're
me.
facilitating, then I could just paste
Yeah.
things.
I'm just air traffic controlling everything here. So our final issue is, as a user, I want the app to look professional and welcoming. Those words can mean anything to anybody, which is why the text of this issue is giving you some examples of a design process we can follow, some branding words we can target. So we're talking about typography, we're talking about mood boards. I won't go over all this with you because there's so much to cover, and you should all take some time to read it. And then if and when, again, I'm saying it one more time, and when you have questions, we're going to talk about them in Slack as a group. Yeah, really, I don't think that there's much I can do by giving this an overview, but we're spending 2 weeks on this. And then we're going into like full-time career lab stuff for the remainder of our time together. Jenny, I would love to know if you have any advice for everyone now that we're finally here. You've been saying stuff the whole time, but you know.
I don't know how other groups did it. I would say this is when the mentors like step back and really let you guys create your own issues. Like there are no issues left, right? You have to create your own, which is fun and a little like it could get a little disorganized. So you guys really have to like be on the same page. How we did it was we had one instead of like breaking up into pairs and like working on one issue each pair. I think we met at some point in the week and had an hour where we just kind of planned out like the low fidelity like shape and mock-ups of our app, like how we wanted it to look, if there's any big things we want to change, and then just kind of come to agreement on like styling, maybe like the branding colors if you have time, and then break out the tasks from there. We had a designer, so it made things like pretty like we waited a couple of days for we waited a couple of days for like the designer to do her thing, but in the meantime there were a bunch of like bugs that the rest of us were working on, some like usability things, like for example making things consistent or like refactoring and testing. So you could kind of talk to yourselves, talk with the team and figure out what you want to prioritize, and just like split it off that way. You could still split off into pairs and like work on things together. But yeah, it's really up to you, like what you want to work on first, what you want to accomplish. Also, we were confused and we only thought we had 2 weeks, but we ended up having like 3 extra weeks. So I wanted to confirm what the like
Oh,
final day of demo is so that you have your full time, because we spent 2 weeks scrambling and then we had like 2 extra weeks.
So I think this issue was again written before we merged the timeline of Career Lab into the main, like into the full program. So I do think you have more time because we're kind of able to concurrently do Career Lab stuff with this.
Mm.
So I'm gonna say budget for 3 weeks, but also see what you can do, and then treat the extra time you have as a blessing, right? So you can get more stuff done. Don't scramble, don't stress. I know me saying that's not gonna stop you all from stressing. I know how we all are, but like, don't worry about making this a little messy. Don't worry about not doing everything you want to. Don't worry about not doing certain things. We will be so happy for you if you do one thing, if you change one thing. All we care about is that you make decisions about what's important to you and that you are trying to execute them, and you will learn something either way.
Yeah. If
So
there
free yourself from the shackles of having to be perfect is all I'm asking.
if there is interest, I guess, I would recommend using a design tool like Figma, like just making lo-fi. I always get them mixed up. Lo-fi designs, just so you have something to look at when you meet together as a team. Because sometimes you like each have different ideas, but then in the end, you don't know where you land. So it's easier to just sketch things out and like agree on a general shape and then move on. Like we had our designer made like pretty high fidelity mock-ups by the end, and I could send them to you. I definitely don't want you guys to go there because there's no need to do that. But I think we used Adobe something. You could use Figma. What is the low fidelity one? Maybe Balsamic is another one for like
Yeah.
Mm.
I would consider that. Just check it out, especially if you have like different ideas and you kind of aren't aligned on what you want the final product to look like right now.
Plus one to everything that Jenny said, it's valuable to practice those tools also because you'll probably end up using them at work. I now have to do battle with Figma every single day, and whether I want to or not. And it's valuable to have been in there, have it done something. But also something else, if it would unblock you and help you execute, don't forget that you can also use HTML and CSS as a mockup. Like make a code pen and just draw squares and stack them together in the arrangement of the UI that you want to do the ugliest, low fidelityest layout that you've ever seen and have that be presentable. Because if you don't have time to learn Figma, but you know how to make blocks in CSS, you can do that. You can show everyone else your idea. It doesn't need to be cute. It just needs to like paint the broadest strokes possible. And in fact, I would argue that the most valuable kinds of mockups you do at this point are the low fidelity ones that just show your layout vision. You can have columns. You can show how tall you want your individual list items to be. You can show what goes where with your shapes and colors. Just let that kind of get the idea out of your head, and then you can refine them with real code or in Figma or whatever else. But my point is, I guess, use whatever tool helps you be productive in this situation. If you can practice with Figma, that'd be great because of, again, the career experience you're likely to have with it. But just don't forget that you have this mockup tool already with browser stuff available to you.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, this is what you're both already suggesting, but I would reiterate, I feel like this is a good opportunity for us to try to kind of practice the agile methodology stuff of being like, what's the amount of time we have? What are our user stories? What is it we want to accomplish by the end? And then breaking those into tickets and kind of assigning how much effort we think each piece will require, so that we can really practice that kind of planning for it. I think would be good.
One more suggestion I'd like to make as you're doing your designs is design. I'm slowly putting together my environment here. Design with the assumption that your user screen looks like this.
Yeah.
And then if it looks like this, that's a bonus. So if you are setting a viewport at, let's say, 320px as your constraint, and if all you do is design for the mobile user, that to me will be a success because, again, the mobile user doesn't have the option of more screen size, but we want to make sure that they're able to see everything.
Right.
Yeah, my first design. One, I'm remembering now the chaos of the last 2 weeks, but I remember because we used CSS files. Well, first we wanted to prioritize like refactoring, so we pulled everything into components, and then we went to style. So we created CSS files for every component, and then basically what happened was all four of us were working on the same files all at the same time, like updating styles, and it got really chaotic. I would recommend, I don't know if there's a better way of working with CSS files across a team when you guys are potentially touching all the same files. I feel like Tailwind is a better way to work, like when you're working with a team of developers. I don't know if you guys know how to use that. We use it at work and it's pretty straightforward because you just like add it into your JSX. But yeah, I would think about that. I think in the end, let's say, for example, one person has a task of updating all the messaging, right? So to be consistent, you'll be touching like every single form, every single component. And if someone is working on the form part as a task, there will be merge conflicts, there will be confusion. You'll be creating the same classes for different things when you don't need to be doing double the work sometimes. So that was just my input on it. Could get a little disorganized, especially since you're creating your own tickets for the first time and like, I don't know, organizing your own work for the same time. I think the program did a pretty good job at making sure you touch different files like when you break off, but now like everything's fair game. So yeah, I think about that.
One more thing I want to say as we're leading into these next 3 weeks, and if you didn't see in the chat, Megan clarified we have 3 weeks of work between now and our final day. As part of the last 3 weeks, you'll be doing more attentive synchronous career lab stuff as well. So please, please, please do not spend hours and hours and hours and hours of doing stuff for us with us, because we want to be mindful of your time as busy adults with things to do, but also because you'll have other stuff on your plate with the career lab things. And that includes practicing for a mock interview by reading a script that we've given, I think, like some questions that you might get, and then also being interviewed by your mentors in a mock interview. So please remember that's coming up, and please, please, please don't spend hours and hours and hours, especially if you're stuck. Ask for help from any of us as soon as possible. Like try something for 10 minutes, and if you have no productive ideas, yell at us. We'll come get you wherever you are. That's, I think, all I had in my head. Megan, Jenny, anything you want to add?
Do we have guidance on these mock interviews? Like
those are all in the brief. I'm going to use that excuse because I can't remember anything, but it's all there. In the coming weeks, you'll see more stuff that's about like what's coming next. And the interview is well, first of all, actually, typically we've scheduled something that's like an example interview for your mentor, so you can see what it's like. So Megan, Jenny, who wants to interview and be interviewed? Anyone in particular? Not now, of course, but just like in general.
I don't have strong feelings either way. I will say it's been a little while since I've done a technical interview, not to put Jenny on the spot, but
I think what that's saying is that I can grill you then, Megan. It's gonna be okay.
Yeah, that's true too. That's true too.
All we want to do is show you what it might be like to experience an interview, and how you might comport yourself. So just give you an example of like by performance, this is what it would be like. And I think I even have a problem it's not like the one that you have in the career lab, so that way you don't get any spoilers. So
Okay.
And this will be both behavioral and technical.
Oh gosh. I actually don't remember if we have a synchronous behavioral step. But I know that we've had like modules on getting your LinkedIn ready, making it look sharper, etc. I don't think we've ever had enough time to schedule people for both a behavioral and that's actually probably wrong. I think we used to, but now it's a little harder to have time for everyone to do all that because it requires multiple mentors volunteering their time, of course. And things are a bit different now that the Career Lab is bundled in with the main program, because before it used to be like, do you want to do Career Lab? Okay, great, sign up. And then we find other mentors to do all the Career Lab stuff. But now we're limiting it to what can be reasonable for 3 mentors to do for a team of people, given their time volunteer constraints.
It looks like we might do both. I'm looking at the project brief. Week 9 says job fit mock interview. So
Okay,
we
there you
schedule
go.
schedule the behavioral interviews, and then the next week we schedule technical mock interviews.
Well, there you go. So it is in there. And we will
Oh,
all
because
three-
there's a take-home assignment. There's like a take-home
Yes.
assignment that you all do, and then the mock technical interview is walking through
Mhm.
that.
Yeah, the interview is based on just talking about the work that you do. And again, the goal with that interview is not to be perfect. It's to spend an hour seeing what you can do in that hour and talking about it. Companies that don't suck will honor that and will appreciate where you get in the time. And the goal of these, in my opinion, should never be to build the production app. It should be to see how you like what problems you approach and how you approach them, and to see that you can write code that's authentic and application-like and all that stuff. So not bringing all this up to scare you because you have plenty of time, but just know this is in the future, and feel free to read ahead if you want to and ask us questions or plan your time accordingly. But the main thing is, I know from experience that this design sprint, if you will require some time and attention that you haven't had to give before, and that's something we have to kind of accept. You'll just be spending some time together, ideating, planning, deciding what you like. And that will probably be more than the 5 hours a week that we'd like you to spend. But please, please, please try very hard not to like burn yourself out doing this, even if you're having fun, because we want to be mindful of your time as a team. And if we can help at all, and even just like making a decision that's hard, we can help you make that decision, rather than have you sit there in a healthy debate for 3 hours.
So I mean, I think the mock interview stuff, we can be flexible as well, right? Like if you don't want both of them, I'm sure we won't force you to do mock interviews with us. It's just something that is there if you want. I think my cohort, we skipped the technical interviews and just really focused on behavioral interviews because that's what our mentors decided would be like a better use of our time, like getting our like stories and like elevator pitch, like those things down, just so you can properly talk about yourself. So yeah, I mean, we could be flexible depending on time constraints. Also, if you guys really want to focus on the design of your app and that's taking up all your time, you can decide on picking one over the other, right? Like, I hope I'm not like making up rules for the program, but I feel like it's pretty flexible, right? Depending on what the mentees kind of want.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's no grades. This is just like whatever is going to be the most helpful for you all. So let us know what those things would be.
There's no grades, only for us. No, I'm kidding. But also, I wanted to bring all that stuff up because it's very valuable to have that practice. So if you want it, it's there, and we are happy to give it to you, and or to suffer in front of you to take the spotlight off of you and put it onto us for a while. Just let us know, and especially because this is the last cohort that we're ever doing, ever. Sad face. I'm happy to give more time than I ordinarily would have to make sure you get as much out of this as possible. So if that includes, if that means that we do interviews after the 10-week conclusion of the program, that's fine with me personally, because I'd much rather have you have the experience that you want and the practice that you think is valuable than to say it's been 10 weeks, go get out of my life. We're not going to do that here. You're welcome to hang out as long as the Slack group here exists.
Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Of course.
I was thinking, moving forward, how will we be deciding all the design stuff and everything for the app? Are we going
You
to
just
get
asked the question
together?
of the week. My recommendation would be to start a Slack thread where you start exchanging ideas, and maybe to meet again as a group. Before we can, of course, use office hours for that, to talk as a group. But I had a really nice thought this morning and didn't write it down, so of course it's left my head. But Jenny, if you have any ideas for a concrete starting place for design decisions, please save me from dying on stage here.
Would set up a time that works for all four of you and just go from there. Talk about your ideas, maybe look at some like other websites together. I would look at the previous projects from Collab Lab just to get an idea of what is feasible for this design sprint. Look at ours too, not to, put our own project out there. I think ours look pretty nice. And then just decide what is feasible within like each week, and then also like the general 3 weeks. But starting point, like just have a meeting together and talk, and then you'll come up with some kind of plan together, I believe. Yeah. And we don't like the mentors won't be part of this project, won't be part of this process, I think. So you guys are kind of free to do what you guys want to, and we will be here
Okay.
to support, I think.
Jenny, were you group 70?
No,
No. Which number were you again?
67.
I was poking around. If you didn't know, the URLs for the deployed apps follow. Oh no, you're 67. The deployed app for 67 is not responsive. This is the URL. But they all follow the structure of TCL number smart shopping list web app, if you want to be nosy. The only one that I've found, because I was testing several of them, the only one that I found that seemed to, huh?
It's working for me.
Oh, well, maybe it's just my browser then. Dang.
Yeah, it's working over here. It's nice.
Cool. I'm just the one that's broken, but 70 works also, and it looks nice.
Looks nice.
Oh, now it works. Okay, maybe it just had to warm up. That was weird. I promise the first time I navigated, it did not do anything.
So question, will this deployed app be there forever, or it's going to be stopped at some point?
So one of the
I think
reasons
they
why
get
we
stopped eventually. Some of them are like some of the old ones. I'm going back and checking my old cohorts, and the first one that I was in is in like the 20s, and that one's not up anymore.
Yeah, one of the reasons why we switched to authentication and caused you all the grief that we caused you by changing the changing the structure of the project and not changing some of our issues is because doing auth allows us to have the Firebase database respond to requests for longer in the future. In the past, we didn't have authentication and the app would work for anybody and would serve data to anybody. We ran the risk of running up the Collab labs like bills by having the app be open forever and respond to requests forever. So one of the reasons, so again, the reason that we have auth now is to hopefully theoretically allow this to be in service indefinitely because the odds of it incurring a bill are extremely low. Does that make sense? And of course, if you ever are worried about the risk of losing this app, you can always make your own Firebase account and you can, later, Megan, no worries. You can always change the API keys and host it yourself, or like have it be attached to your own account that you have control over and can fund if you get very popular for some reason.
And also you can, wait, hello. Also like there'll be a demo at the end. So and that will be recorded. So you can put the demo of it on your portfolio or GitHub or whatever. So there are ways to like show your project and talk about it, even if it's not live. If it's deployed still.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
That's a good idea too.
I've been
Go ahead.
hosting the projects we made for bootcamp on Render, and now Render like every month is like, hey, we're gonna drop your database again if you don't pay us, and so I have to like reseed it and recreate it every time. So like having a demo video would be great way to handle that. But yeah, but this looks great. Yeah, this some good ideas in here.
You guys have any other concerns or questions?
Yeah, I have a question to Jenny. While using the Tailwind, I did one in one of my project and it became like messy too, where I was trying to do something and it didn't let me do it. So I ended up creating a CSS file, also installing the Bootstrap in there. So at that point I was learning. So like, is it good to only use the Tailwind CSS and not have to work with the CSS itself? What's your experience in that?
I would say like you pick one kind of. I don't know if there's scenarios where you use Tailwind, but you still need a CSS file for.
Yeah, I was learning. Maybe I didn't know how to do it.
I would say Tailwind pretty much would cover everything you want to do.
Cover everything. Okay, I see.
Have you seen a scenario where you also need a CSS file for some reason?
I'm the wrong person to ask this because I hate Tailwind. I have threatened to quit jobs over the prospect of them changing to Tailwind and not using CSS. I'm not even kidding. I have said I will quit if we start using Tailwind because I'm a hater. So again, I think you should use whatever tools you find are most productive. Even if that's Tailwind, I will still love and forgive you for the rest of your natural lives. My only cautionary tale against Tailwind is not whether or not Tailwind is bad. You know what I think. It's that Tailwind is an extra thing to learn for those of you who aren't fluent in it right now. And you are more likely to be proficient at CSS by itself right now.
That is
so just make that decision. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, Dory Bell actually did ask me to bring up the fact that she wanted to mention that she hasn't seen Tailwind or Bootstrap, and so she's willing to learn them. But yeah, just basically the point you were just making, the consideration.
Yeah, if you all know CSS, which I'm guessing you do, I would just stick with that, because you have a limited amount of time. I'm curious to hear. I know it's a very polarizing topic, so I'm curious to hear why you think that way, you do. But that's a whole other.
First of all, I mean, I could rant about this for a half an hour right now, but I will just say that like I have an issue with tools that repackage something that is already fluent and possible in another language. Like, but the thing is, I know CSS very well, like the native CSS. I can do everything I want to in CSS confidently and fluently and quickly. So for me, I need to learn an abstraction on top of something I already know that to me is harder to understand and intuit and read than the thing I already know. So I was never going to like Tailwind because I know how to do the thing. It's like an old person thing, right? I'm old. I want to do I want to use my tooling the way that I know it. But as a philosophy, I also just kind of like to use the platform the way that it exists. I don't want to have CSS be in JavaScript and all that stuff, and I don't want to have to learn what MT2 means. How dare you? I want to write margin top and have it be good. Um, so, there's lots of reasons people like Tailwind because again, if you know it, it's very fast, it's very easy, and you can co-locate stuff. But I just like things to be a certain way, and I will die on that hill.
I don't find that many senior engineers say that, but I think that all makes sense. Definitely is a learning curve. In that case, like I would CSS files, I think would completely do the job. I would just what happened with us is we were creating classes on top of classes that were like styling the same components, and like we had a class for one single element in the code, right? Like a class should apply to like all buttons or whatever, not just one single thing. I think it was because in my cohort there were like different levels of CSS knowledge, and also like people were styling things in a different way than another person, but styling the same thing. So it got very, very messy. And also we were working in different files, different CSS files that like were pulled into the same components. You know, it got very messy.
Right.
I'm not saying with Tailwind it will not be messy because you can have the same exact problem. My point was just to like consider that it will be messy. I think no matter what. I think if you guys have a bunch of people working on it at the same time, and also there's no like pre-existing styling that you can refer to just like pull in, you know, everything is from scratch. So everyone will go into it with their pre-existing CSS knowledge. So something to keep in mind. If you organize it well enough, I think you guys won't have any problems. Also, if you still work in pairs, I think like in the spirit of the program, like you could still break off and work in pairs, right? So you can keep things organized that way. But we use Tailwind Network. I know bunch of other companies do. So worth learning how it works, at least.
Sure. Yeah, one thing I'll say in defense of Tailwind, and if any of you tell Tailwind I said this, I'll deny it in court in front of God and everybody. But as Jenny was saying, over time you run into people styling the same, trying to accomplish the same effect in different ways, and Tailwind kind of says, this is how you accomplish this outcome. You use these classes this way. You have to do it that way. And so everyone is writing the same code and shipping the same CSS. And because Tailwind is aware of your JavaScript, like of your UI and of the CSS, it can strip out stuff you don't actually use. You do end up with overall less code being sent to the users because, again, you're only sending exactly the styles that ever get applied to your page, and not, let's say, you wrote a CSS file 3 years ago that has a bunch of classes that are no longer being used. Unless you prune those out with some other means, you're sending all that code to the user every single time anyway. So there are trade-offs that happen at every scale, and there are different ways to make messes in Tailwind or out of Tailwind. And also, I want to say you will make a mess doing this design stuff. You will. That's valuable. How you decide to change it, fix it, or say this is a tolerable level of mess for the future for these reasons. Those are all important things that you get to decide on your own as a team, and also have stories then for future interviews.
Yeah, the stories are very, very important, I think. Like you guys should already start thinking about the different stories that have come out of the Collab Lab.
Mhm.
That will answer like the most common behavioral questions, right? Whenever you like someone explain a time you've had a conflict with someone, or I don't know, had to prioritize conflicting like interests, or those basic questions. I think what I was told by my mentors was that this program will give you enough to answer all those questions. Because I, at that point, was heavily still talking about my previous experience as a tech writer. I was like, oh, it's tech experience. It's like I can have stories from that. But when you're interviewing and you're transitioning careers, you don't want to talk about your experience as a tech writer. You want to talk about your experiences as a developer, right? So I would definitely use Collab Lab, like, and find stories, and like talk about, I don't know, think about like decisions you've made. Like you have everything in this program. Everything in this program is enough for you to like probably get your first job or do well in a behavioral interview and make you seem like, you're a good developer and seem to know what you're doing. So definitely think about that. We will have mock interviews anyways. So you probably will have to at some point if you want, of course. But I highly recommend preparing some stories for when those behavioral interviews come up. Yeah.
One thing I want to say as an example of that is I several times in memory have been asked, what was the time you had to refactor something after it already existed? How did you handle refactoring legacy code? You're about to do that with this. I mean, it's the project less than 10 weeks old, so I would hardly call it legacy at this point, but you're about to refactor something that you built, especially in the example of your notifications. So you have a real story about how you took something that existed and made it into something else while keeping the requirements basically the same.
Cool.
I have to go. I just realized what time it is. I've really enjoyed spending extra time with you as always, but I have to run. Are we good to go with this week, do we think? I know that there's a lot of open-ended things going on, but my suggestion would be to start a Slack thread, start exchanging ideas, share screenshots, links to things that you like, tag everyone, be obnoxious, be so obnoxious for this design sprint, because we want to, like, we, your mentors, want and probably even need to see kind of how you're thinking, how you're talking. So try not to silo off into virtual, like video only calls or to one-on-one DMs if you can. Of course, you can and should meet directly as much as you think that would make your lives easier. But like, invite us to the video calls if you're having them, just so we can keep an eye on what you're talking about and we can help you get unstuck if we think you're getting stuck.
Yeah. If you have
Great.
questions, I can
That's
stay.
Cool.
If anyone else has questions, I can stay for a few minutes.
Well, I had a question. It was more towards like the mock interview. Do we go ahead and schedule that with any one of you guys, or would you guys share like time